Alien widow refused shelter in the colony, doomed to freeze, until a human opened his door. The wind over Ganymede Station bit like a living thing, thin, electric, and merciless. Floodlights carved trembling cones through the wideout while the shelter queue curled along the steel fence. The tannoy kept repeating in a tired voice that there was room for registered colonists only. When the door hissed shut after the last person and a red bar lit across it, the line deflated into the storm. She did not plead. Tall and narrow-shouldered beneath a frost-stiff shawl of woven silvergrass, the alien woman watched her breath crystallize and vanish. Illyra of Ithra, she told the guard when he would not look at her. Widow of Kale. He only pointed at the sign. No entry/no unregistered, then at the white horizon as if banishment were a direction. She set off into it. From the rim blocks where maintenance techs lived, Mason Cole saw the figure moving wrong for a human, listing sideways, one arm wrapped around herself while the other tried to shield her face. He had spent 2 winters learning the way the cold killed, first in small, reasonable ways, then all at once. He threw open his door before he had decided to do it. "Inside," he said. "Quick!" She stumbled across his threshold and collapsed to her knees, breath rattling the loose cookware on the shelf. Up close, her skin was like deep river stone dusted with frost, her eyes a pale ember green. 3 silver rings clasped the edge of her ear, mourning markers, Mason remembered from a safety briefing nobody listened to. He sealed the door, turned the heat up until the vents sang, and pressed a mug into her hands. "Illyra," she said, after the first burn of broth thawed her voice. "I will not repay this with trouble. The station'll do that for you," he said. "I'm Mason." A warning crawled across the cheap screen on his wall. Civil notice. Harboring non-registered sentience during weather emergency is punitive offense. Mason turned it face down. Illyra watched him, and in the silence came the storm's thin scream, the house creaking as snow knuckled into old seams. He handed her a blanket. She folded it with ritual care as if it needed permission to touch her. Then, as if remembering the etiquette of the living, she spread it across her lap and let out a breath that sounded like surrender. "Kale fell," she said, to no one in particular. "In the acid vents 2 months past." He knew the ground as if he'd grown from it. The ground did not know him. Mason could have said something, could have told her about his sister on Mars Habitat 12 who went to sleep under a cough and never woke up, about how grief rearranged rooms so that nothing fit anymore. He only said, "I'm sorry," and meant it. The lights flickered, then died. The house dimmed to the ember of the little stove. The storm outside roared as if the soundboard had been turned up. Mason's mind leaped to the same map every tech in the rim carried behind the eyes. The power grid, the intake fans icing over, the coolant loop that never liked this kind of wind. The station could ride brownouts, but a full blackout with a shelter sealed would stack bodies. He stood, already pulling on his heavy coat. "Grid's choking," he said. "I have to go." "I can help," Illyra said. The protest on his face made the corners of her eyes soften. "I know ice. I was born between storms. Kale taught me the singers in pipe and stone. If your system is trapped by its own heat, I can find where it hums wrong. Security will nail us both if they catch you." "They already have me," she said with a small, tired smile. "You opened your door. Let me open mine." They moved like shadows through the service corridors, the world reduced to hooded lights and frost filming the joists. At the intake bay, the big fan screamed against a skin of rime. Mason shouldered open an access panel. Air knifed his cheeks. Illyra pressed her palm to the metal and closed her eyes. Her fingers spread like listening. "There," she said, tilting her head. Hear how the note splits. Your coolant loop chatters against air where it craves water. She pointed with a long, delicate finger to a section of pipe Mason had never seen fail. They crawled to it, bodies knocking dust into suspended constellations. The pipe was hoary with ice crystals. Mason swore softly. If we crack that coupling, we flood the trench and it freezes worse. Illyra unwound the silvergrass shawl and slipped free a narrow tool tucked in its folds. It wasn't metal. It looked grown, a pale crescent like bone. She set it against the pipe, humming. The tool caught the note and fed it back, a counter-singing that made the ice tremble. Frost fell in glittering sheets without wetting the seal. Mason stared. We do it with heat coils. Yours is quieter. Heat is a shout, she said. Sometimes you must listen the ice loose. Even as the flow steadied, the patrol drone's blue light washed over the far doorway, sweeping, steady, searching. Mason shoved Illyra into a recess and slapped his ID chip against a maintenance console. The drone turned, recognized his clearance, and relayed a warning. Facility trespass confirmed. Report all non-registered personnel. Mason kept his face blank for the camera. Acknowledge. No contacts, he lied, feeling the chill of a new kind of fear, the kind that did not leave a body even when the heat came back. By the time the fans ran true and the grid stopped coughing, the station had begun to glow again behind its veils of ice. People would wake and say someone must have fixed it. They would be right and wrong by halves. At Mason's door, the street was full of snow ghosts and angry voices. The warden stood flanked by 2 drones and a dozen neighbors who pretended they weren't curious. Mason Cole, the warden said. You ignored broadcast directives. Step aside. He could have eased Illyra out, handed her 3 minutes of mercy and watched the law take it back. Instead he opened the door wide and let everyone see the blanket on the chair and the damp thaw melting off Illyra's shawl, the silver rings at her ear, the way grief made a person look simultaneously too large and too small. She saved your breath, he said, voice steady. You like that the lights came back. You like that your heaters didn't die. That was her. The warden frowned at the drones. Unverified. Illyra stepped forward, not quite touching Mason's arm. I can hum the panel again, she said, and did 3 soft notes that made the vent in Mason's wall answer, a sympathetic thrumming like a purr. The neighbors looked at one another, faces changing by little degrees. Someone coughed. Someone's kid, hair sticking up in 10 directions, said, That's pretty. Emergency order, Mason said, pointing at the red glare still bleeding across the shelter sign. If a storm kills without asking for your papers, so should our doors save without asking for them. Silence held, the way it does before a crowd decides if it will be a mob or a village. The warden lifted his chin, then lowered it, then said at last, Council meets at midday. You'll come, both of you. They did. In the low room that always smelled of oil and old coffee, Mason said what he had, and Illyra sang the failures on the grid and how to teach the ice to part. By unanimous vote, because nobody wanted to be the one to say no where anyone could write it down, the council added a line to the emergency protocol. During lethal weather events, doors are to be open to any sentient in need. Each person in the room felt the colony grow in that instant, as if a new wing had swung out from it. Dawn broke thin and sharp. Mason walked Illyra back to the rim blocks. His little house looked less like a hiding place and more like a beginning. She set the smallest of her silver rings on his windowsill. We keep 3, she said softly. 1 to remember, 1 to release, 1 to carry forward. Which is that? He asked. Forward, she said, and looked at the door he had opened, and the day beyond it. If you'll have me here. He swallowed, the winter air burning sweet in his chest. I think I already do. Outside, the storm ran itself out across the flats. Inside, the new rule of the colony hung in the warm air like a promise. They made breakfast slowly, learning each other's quiets, while the door, propped open for the first time since Mason had moved in, let light spill across the threshold and didn't ask who crossed.